Hello, you're listening to Somewhere on the Rainbow. I'm Thomas, and I'm here today with Andrew, and we'll be discussing gender identity and sexuality. And Andrew, what do you most closely identify as, and what are your pronouns?
I most closely identify as a trans man, and I go by he, him.
All right. And when did you realize that you were trans or start to research this?
Oh gosh, probably seventh grade, end of seventh grade. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Wow, seventh grade.
Did anything spur this, or was it like a general feeling that you had?
It was kind of a general feeling, and I'd had a lot of LGBTQ plus friends who were really accepting of it. So I was like, I'll learn more about it, and then I just kind of realized, hey, I identify with this, and I also identify with that. I should probably do more research into what I'm feeling.
And so you basically just, your research was having supportive friends who are already in the community
Hmm.
who could help educate you on some of the lingo and how things sort of work, like asexuality, transgender, the trans spectrum, and all that.
Yeah, so I would ask them some questions and then I mainly like would go online and search up questions. The amount of tests I took asking if I'm like trans or gay was so much. So I did so much research on it. And when I had questions, I would be like, I'd go to my friends and be like, hey, do you know what this is? Or have you heard of this before? Or what are your opinions on this? So that they help a lot.
So you said you did quizzes. Is this like the type of BuzzFeed-esque quiz where you go on and then they'd give you a score out of like 30 saying,
I did so many different quizzes and they were always in the middle of the night when everyone thought I was asleep. I didn't want anyone walking in on me and asking questions. Um, oh God, I definitely took BuzzFeed quizzes. And then there's another website, All the Tests, I think it was called. And then there was another one like by a certified like medical community that like listed your gender dysphoria and stuff. So that was a lot of different quizzes.
interesting, yeah. Personally, I can't say I did not do the same.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure a lot of us have
Yeah.
because you're a young kid in middle school and BuzzFeed's all over your
Yep.
YouTube feed, so why not?
Why not?
Um, yeah, so that's actually a pretty funny story that I hope
Mm.
a lot of us can actually relate to there.
Yeah.
Um, so knowing that you're a trans man, how has that your identity affected your view on like society's gender norms and stuff? Like the whole gender binary that's existed for a long time. Like if you're a man, you go to work 12 hours a day, come home, have a meal prepped by a wife. Uh,
Hmm. Well, before I actually, before I started searching up LGBTQ terms and stuff, I've always hated the idea of strict gender norms. Like, even like, I remember back when I was like 6 and 7 being like, well, why do girls always have to do this? Why can't girls be a construction worker or do things that typically a man can do? Or why do I never see a single dad or a stay-at-home dad? Like, why are there so many strict gender roles around this? And then as I was introduced to the community and learned more about it, I realized that wow, there's a lot more about this. And yeah, like there's a lot more stricter gender roles, and there's a lot of people in the world who like have very traditional values about it. And I've always just never quite understood it personally.
I think that's actually a very good take there, because I
Hmm.
think a lot of us when we're younger and stuff, we don't really understand why people
Yeah.
are the way they are. Like, for instance, with racism and homophobia,
Hmm.
most if you put two little kids together, they're not going to be caring whatsoever
Yeah,
what
no,
someone looks like,
exactly.
identifies as, etc. So it is a very, important thing to keep in mind.
Hmm.
So did anything spur you having this feeling like potential dysphoria, as I know that's something a lot of trans people have, and I think
Hmm.
for to be trans, you have to have a bit of gender dysphoria.
Yeah. Um, I can't think of any specific moment, but I've always felt uncomfortable with my body at times. I hated going in the water, hated going to the beaches, lakes, even swimming pools, hated wearing bathing suits. They were terrible. I absolutely hated wearing dresses. Whenever I had to go somewhere that where I had to wear a dress, I would constantly cry before I had to put it on. And I knew my parents always felt bad, but we didn't have anything else for me to wear. Like my first communion, I had this puffy white dress that was my mom's, and I don't remember being happy about putting that on. And little things like going to my brother's first communion or my eighth grade graduation, I did not like wearing dresses. But I think majority of my discomfort and dysphoria comes from being perceived as a girl, and I've always felt weird when people refer to me as that.
Would you say that's a sort of normal train of events for most trans people, or from
I
what you
think,
know, as
bro,
it's all anecdotal here?
yeah, from what I know, I would think it's relatively normal for like trans guys who are being like have to wear more feminine clothing. They don't feel comfortable wearing it because then they're like being forced into this feminine side of them that I've always hated. I've always preferred wearing boy stuff. I would get pride whenever people would call me a tomboy. I felt so happy. I'd constantly compete with my cousin, be like, "We're like the tomboys of the family," and I'd always add, "But I'm more tomboy than you." Um, yeah, I was very mean to her as a kid. Um, but I would always like hate wearing feminine stuff, and I think a lot of trans people have that same kind of feeling where like they don't want to wear clothing that associates with the gender they were assigned at birth.
So that's actually very educational and interesting, I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people, they may not know a trans person, they, you know, haven't ever thought to research it or get educated upon the
Yeah.
subject. So hopefully, that shines a little light to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a bit of a bigger question here, but has being transgender and knowing that you are affected your sexuality?
Oh gosh, that's a very tough question for me, but I think I can answer it. Well, before I started questioning my gender, I was questioning my sexuality first. And for a while, I identified as pansexual, and then it became bisexual. And then that's when I started questioning my gender. And then I was like, then it became back to my sexuality questioning after a couple of years of identifying as a bisexual girl. And then I was like, but am I really a girl? Am I really bi? So then recently I've been questioning my sexuality more recently. And then I'll be like, but do I really like girls? Am I gay? Am I bisexual? So right now I'm leaning towards gay, but I'm currently identifying as bi with a preference for guys.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a bit of a roller coaster story there that I think
Yeah.
most members of the LGBTQ community can relate to, because usually
Mm-hmm.
sexuality and knowing what you identify as is a bit of a roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a fair analogy. And so, Andrew, with your interesting perspectives, what is your opinion on neopronouns?
I think that in my opinion, I could care less what people use as their pronouns, but there are definitely times where there will be people mocking it. Like I've seen people identify as um use ACAB and ACAB self as their pronouns, and I think that's mocking a movement or something like that. Um, but I personally couldn't really I could care less. No, couldn't care less about if you use Zem itself. Um, but I can definitely see why some people think it might be mocking the trans community using neo pronouns. But as I said before, I couldn't care less.
All right, yeah, so that's a rather good take, I'd say. And so, and it's more just if it's going with like a movement's name, so it's like BLM self, ALM
Mm-hmm.
self, um,
Yeah.
and things like that. That's where you draw the line on like what's really acceptable.
Yeah, because I personally think no one really identifies using ACAB or ACAB self, BLM self. I think that's people who don't agree with that movement mocking people who do. And that's just not right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's a very yeah, that's a fair assessment, I would say, and I do respect that opinion there.
Mm-hmm.
And personally do agree with it. And so with us reaching sort of high time marker here, is there anything else you'd like to add or say to anyone in the community or questioning whether they are in the community or not?
I know there's a lot of people out there who will constantly tell you you're not valid and your feelings are not valid. You are valid. Your feelings are valid. If you're questioning whether your community, that's valid. Your feelings, valid. Um, don't listen to accounts or YouTube accounts, TikTok accounts, Twitter accounts, any account saying you can't identify as they, them, or you can't switch your gender, or girls have to like guys. No, no. If you feel a certain way, you are valid. That is valid. Listen to yourself and what your heart and brain want.
All right. And I think that's a very important thing for anyone questioning or in the community to remember that they are. Um, and so I thank you for coming on the podcast,
You're welcome.
Andrew. And so to everyone listening, thank you for listening. And this was the